Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. So, there is a lot coming up for many who have, it's like, we talk about development in our expanding our consciousness and having, like we think of it as sometimes going around in a circle, but it's really a spiral, right? Like we talk
Right.
about the spiral,
Right.
but
Right.
the spiral is still circular.
Right. Right. I've had it explained to me one in the beginning of my awakening time where it's a it's a loop, but it's a forward moving loop, but there's still the back of the loop.
And a lot. Hi, Yasmin. Hi, Anne. Yeah, and so we have these and like a lot of people are going through right now um, cycles or what we think is a pattern or
Right.
something that we feel like we can't break free of, right? Which really can really be a habit, right?
Habit.
That's how
Right.
we're talking about. Um, and when we have that come up, it's really sometimes time for us to ask ourselves some challenging questions.
Right. Right. And anytime you get into the judgment of, oh well, I have these good habits and then I have these bad habits. You've got duality.
Right.
Which always makes always begs the question, okay, why do you need them? Why is there that perceived need, and why the judgment of that behavior?
Yeah. Yeah. And we think of, so when we say habits, it's a challenging thing to explain. So when you say habit, people think of brushing your teeth or taking a shower or getting dressed or whatever, which is a habit in itself, right? But then you have the habits of the kind of relationships you get into, the
Right.
kind of interactions you have in relationships, the kind of things you put in your reality that limit you or hold you back because then you can claim victimhood to them, right?
Right. Or like when you get how you cope with stress,
Hmm.
like the emotional eating, or the excessive exercise, or excessive sleeping. Anyway, any coping mechanism.
Right, right. And it's funny because I have a client I'm working with who is, good morning, Nicole, um, who is breaking, is in the place of breaking her patterns. Excuse me. The greatest part was her recognizing that recognizing it finally. She's like, well, I go through this. I go through what are bipolar tendencies, but not bipolar.
Right. Right. Right.
And she's like, and I'll go into this high and then I have it for this many days. And then I start to, break down. And then, because I give it 150% and then I exhaust myself. And then there's this downward spiral. And so she really has extended now because she is moderating her stuff and being in a place much more nurturing for herself in the long run and changing her patterns, changing her habits to say, okay, I can do this and I don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
I can do it like a step at a time, which sometimes is less overwhelming to people, right? But you know, the so here's the whole thing. If something comes around to us again and again and again, there's still something we have left to resolve within it,
Right.
right? or
Absolutely.
or shift ourselves to act differently when it comes up so that it doesn't come up again. It's almost
Right.
like,
And respond differently. Right.
yes.
And respond from that place of wholeness versus that fear or whatever insecurity or self-loathing that creeps in,
Yeah.
that sends you in a particular direction of
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah. So
Right.
we look at something we can look at something very 3D, but like the stuff that comes up a lot that I deal with clients is our relationship patterns.
Right. Right.
Something I'm working with one of my clients now who's divorced and did so much self-work on getting through an amicable divorce after a very long marriage and moving on and coming to peace with all that. And now, in the breath of exploring new relationships after
Right.
a space of time, is um, being faced with the energy of some patterns that this individual had faced in their marriage.
Right.
And so it's interesting because then what happens is energetically you're like, oh, well, this is comfortable.
Well, and you fall back on what you feel you know,
Right. Yep.
and what you feel um, secure in or confident in, or I know just from personal experience, like any like my dog is sick, and it's like I fall back on the, well, I have to make it better. I have to do this, or I have to try this, or I have to look at this, and that's me wanting to make it better so I'll be okay with it.
Right.
And that's I recognize that that's not necessarily honoring the journey,
Right.
but it's about me.
Right. Well, and recognizing it's about you is the first step. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So, like my client, for example, is a sacrificer, and all in their marriage, um, they did a lot of sacrificing because they were taught to just make the family happy, make the family happy. And
Right.
that's what makes you worthwhile as a person,
Right.
is making the family happy. Right.
Right.
And and then, somewhere along the line, they equated it in their mind to, I'm only a good person if I'm sacrificing myself to make others happy. Right. It
Mm-hmm.
only makes me valuable if I sacrifice myself to make others happy. Right. And then,
Right.
which is, people say that's ridiculous, but many people do this.
Well, and a lot of times it's totally unconscious.
Yeah. And I'm not even talking about a woman. I mean, this is a man. So
Right.
it's like both women and men do this because of what they've been taught. It's been the cultural expectation and
Right.
everything else. And then we think that's the only thing that makes us a good spouse. That's the only thing that makes us a good person or a good friend or whatever, is if I sacrifice myself. So then you get
Right.
into the pattern, even if you're like aware of it, right? It's this pattern of how you interact with people.
Right.
And so now the good part is being conscious. So it's come around to say, okay, are you going to actually fall into that pattern again? Or are you going to actually look at it and say, yeah, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. I'm ready to
Right.
move beyond
Right.
this.
And I mean, this the same could be said for any pattern. Like, for instance, if you believe in order to meditate, you have to have a certain environment. You have to have, low lights, music, incense. You have to have,
Crystals. Yeah.
right. You have to have that. That's just another a limitation you're placing on yourself.
Yeah.
And it's, no, you don't. You only do because you believe you do.
That's right. That's right. And so, sometimes when we go through these spirals in consciousness, right, we have like an individual might have something come up again that's been a pattern in the past. And then what the ego does is then starts to rationalize it, going, well, if it came up again, then I'm supposed to do it that way,
Right.
obviously.
Right. Right. And
Versus,
if you look at it, the ego is the one who's like putting these in place, putting these
right.
habits in place, and putting these uh, mechanisms in place that you
Hmm.
fall back on. It's like that, that well-worn groove. Well,
Yeah.
I'm insecure, so, oh, I'm comfortable here in this groove.
Right. Because it makes me feel like a good person because I know what I'm doing here. I feel like I'm
And I can do it almost automatically without thinking about it. So then I can continue on and do this and this and this and this in
right.
our multitasking
And
world.
busying myself and busy myself.
Right. Distracting myself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
And then I can
so,
feel good about myself because I'm actually addressing that while I'm continuing to do all these things too.
yes, because we value ourselves based on how busy we are and how much we
Right.
do. Right.
And what we accomplish in our day.
Right. Which is all ego.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, it's how we do our relationships. It's how we do our day. It's how we do everything. And every once in a while, honestly, I just like to purposely like mix up my patterns, my habits and stuff like
Right.
that. Because sometimes we become also, when we do that though, we go on autopilot.
Hmm.
And so then we become blind to things that we might be getting shown by our expanded self,
Right.
um, that we might not be seeing because we're just blind to this because it goes on autopilot. And it's like, okay, well, I have this running here, so I don't have to pay attention to that. I'm just going to go this way. Right.
Right.
And then what happens? Car accidents, tripping and falling and hurting yourself, and
A
because you're just,
financial disaster,
or financial. Yeah. That's another one. Yeah.
or job loss,
Yeah.
or I mean it, or death of a loved one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's big.
It
Can
is
be.
big. Yeah, because we ignore it so much and then we say, well, what happened? I didn't get any messages about that. Like,
Right. Right.
the biggest thing is yeah, this I get that a lot is I just don't get messages, right? And then the more I talk to the individual and they say, "Oh, well this happened, but I didn't really pay." Oh, yeah, well, but you were getting messages. You were just ignoring them. So then
Right.
your expanded self had to say, "Well, guess we have to turn it up 5 notches because we're ignoring it this way. So now we have to make it that much bigger."
Right.
Right? And there's not like any warning in there, but it's like our preference tech, I don't know about you, but my preference is to actually not have to hit that level of
Right.
emergency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know. I lived for a long time in that place, and nope, I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a and that is true. We become, the more we put in place, that's a habit or a cycle that we put on autopilot,
Hmm.
the more we build up that we're ignoring that's right in front of our face.
Right. I really think that it comes with the times right now where we kind of just go through the motions,
Hmm.
and we aren't living consciously. We aren't listening to guidance. We aren't listening to the messages, and it just it's I think of it as like a pinball. It just bounces from here to here to here to here to
Yeah.
here, versus on a path navigating, which we talk a lot of navigating this chaos.
Right. And what's our catchphrase become? Oh, I'm just ADHD. I'm ADHD. That's like been a catchphrase. And it's sort of
Right.
like, it makes me cringe a little bit whenever people say it, 'cause I'm like, our entire world right now is ADHD, right? And we've
Right.
allowed ourselves to become that way because it's more comfortable to claim ourselves victim to not keeping our attention on a straight or a centered path, right?
Right. Right.
Not straight, but centered path.
Right.
Because when we say we're ADHD, it's like, oh no, I have to look over here, I have to look over here.
Right.
I
Right.
can't look in here. And it's like, but you can look in here. You're just
Hmm.
choosing not to.
Right.
And it doesn't matter, like, well, but the psychologist told me that, and they told me I have to go on medication. And it's like there's your victimhood and your disempowerment and all that kind of stuff. So
Well, and I read something, and of course I can't remember the exact quote, but the gist of it was, is we used to, you know, think that the crazy people needed to be medicated to get along in this world, and now the world's gotten so crazy that people have to be medicated to think that this is normal. And it's like, oh yeah,
yeah. Yep.
oh yeah,
Yep. I know. And the funny thing is how many people have, like, last year, the biggest things, oh, I just want to get back to normal. It's like, what normal are you talking about? Because we've not had normality.
right,
And normality is a egoic perception anyway, right?
right,
What is normal? Normal is,
right,
oh, do I fit into the box of everybody else? Do
right.
I fit into the box of society? Do I fit into the box of my job? Do I fit into, the box of like what I do every day? So, yeah, so all of this ties back around to taking ourselves off of autopilot.
Exactly, exactly.
Um, and really observing ourselves, is because here's the funny part. The more we point it, and sometimes that's where coming to somebody like us really is helpful,
Hmm.
because it's just a different perspective. And I'll tell you, I know some of my clients get really triggered because I'm like, so what about this? Because the ego goes, don't touch that habit, don't touch that pattern. I'm warning you.
And I'm good with that one. Right. Well, and I tell you, I have to admit, plug for our program. This 28 days of forgiveness that we've been doing really has created such an awareness in me of behaviors that stem from the judgment and
Mhm.
from patterns that I've created because of the judgment.
Yes.
And it has just really shaken up a lot of things and it's been amazing.
Yeah, it
It's
really has. Like we didn't even know what we are getting into, and it's like,
I know
wow, like we're digging. It's great. It's been great
it really is.
because it has brought so much up to look at because we're pulling stuff out of these patterns because the patterns were built in judgment to begin with. So when we pull the
Right.
judgment away, when we apologize and forgive and accept and embrace and have gratitude for that, may do that big cycle, that circle that
Right.
we complete,
Right.
then there's like no judgment there, and it's like, oh wait, that pattern just doesn't even feel good to me anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas before we weren't even aware of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, shameless plug if you're watching or
That's right.
listening. It is what, still February. We're in the middle of February and it's still out there. You can go and register. It's 28 days. It's a great program. If we don't say so ourselves, it's 15 to 20 minutes a day. You do your little workbook thing. You go on, you do 10 to 15-minute video. And you hold that, and it's a different forgiveness level. We do world and collective and relationships and individuals and what else?
Community,
And what? And community,
community,
right?
and
And
then
stuff
self.
like that. Yeah. Anne says great class. Thank you,
Yes.
Anne.
Yes.
So, but but yeah, and like we put it at this crazy price of $28 for the 28 days, and it's going up to like 128 at the end of the month, on like
Right.
March 1st. So you can still go in and register and do it. It's one day, just do one day at a time.
And
And you
it's
get,
self-paced. So if you
yep,
need more than one day to process through, you
yep,
can take as many days as you need. It's self-paced and you
yep,
can watch and you can do the videos as many times as you want to,
yep, yep.
as you're drawn to.
So it's up here. You can see it on the Ascended World page here on Facebook, or if you're listening, you can go to our ascendedworld.net under programs. It's listed under programs on the website. So anyway, okay, back to our regularly
Back to the
scheduled program.
topic.
But I
Back
mean,
to the
this is so
habit.
related. It's so funny because I keep on bringing it up. We keep on bringing it up here, and I bring it up on my Thursday podcast because it is such a natural progression of connection
It
that we
really
didn't even
is.
realize. Like, really, 28 days of forgiveness, is there that much? Yeah, and more, right?
Right.
But
Right.
it's not. But and here's the thing, and this goes with the habits and cycles and what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So forgiveness is from apology, and forgiveness is from the ego. All of it's from the ego, right?
Right. Right.
But all of what holds us back is from the ego. All of what keeps
Exactly.
us separate and exclusionary is from the ego. So when we appeal to the ego and we resolve and realize the wholeness of the situation and whatever, then that takes it out to expanded consciousness, because it puts the ego to this, appeasement of, oh, okay, I got it's okay. It's
Right.
okay.
Right. And the
Right.
reason why I created this judgment or this habit or this ritual or whatever you want to call it, I can let go of that now because
Mhm.
I understand and now can have gratitude for it,
Right. Right. And there
which
are
is
things, it's funny because there are things that we came up with on our list of 28 days that it was like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. And then, I go out and do the video because I've been going along with the class and doing,
right.
one day at a time. I'm like, oh my God, where did that come from?
I know. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
I mean, it was much different on the receiving end versus on the creating the recording end. Like you could
Right.
feel it doing the recording, and then you're like watching, you're like, oh, so, but anyway, but that's the whole thing, is we have these things, these judgments that put in place the patterns and the habits that we create.
Right.
And those are coming up. That's where everybody's hitting their head against the wall. They're like, well, why is this happening again? Why is this going on? Well, there's obviously still something unresolved here, or it wouldn't come up. There might be a crumb of, yeah, you want to talk about forgiveness, and a lot of it comes down to the self, right? Of what am I forgiving myself? What do I need to,
Right.
like, I feel like also in the case of this individual, it could be that I'm talking about, could be many things having to do with, I didn't do it well enough. Maybe there's a part of me that still believes I didn't do it well enough, that
Right.
sacrifice to be a
Or
good
I
person,
wasn't committed enough.
or I wasn't committed enough. Then
Right.
that's why it didn't work after like a lot of years. And it's like, or maybe what's coming up is to break that pattern and say, yeah, nope, doesn't serve me anymore because I know I'm more than this.
Right.
And I know that I'm worthy. I know that I'm deserving. I know that I am worth everything and to be as
Mhm.
respected and cherished as much as I respect and cherish others.
And since I've created this, I can create it differently to serve me in the wholeness versus allow the ego to be self-serving,
Yeah.
which I think that for me that's been really important to, because if you fall in that victim role of like, oh well, I can't help it, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I created this, so I can make it different.
Yeah. I know. I know. And that's funny because we say that so often to victimize ourselves. Oh, I just
Right.
can't help it. It's just a part of who I am. How many times have you said that? Right.
Right. Right.
And if it's a part of who you are, you can change it.
Exactly. Because you created it as part of who you are.
Exactly. The creation of
Right.
identity comes from the ego. so,
Right.
and it's like we're saying, it's not bad. It's just that realization and that acceptance. And if we are to expand and live in expanded consciousness while we're in separation, then it's having that consciousness to see what comes from what,
Hmm.
and to say, okay, it's funny because in start, like I said, often when it's, guidance is to pinpoint something that is an individual is blind to in their
Right.
pattern, right? That they a lot of times the first reaction is, what are you talking about? Like, no, that's not the case at all. Like there's this trigger.
Right. Like you just don't understand.
Yeah, you just don't get it. You don't get
Right.
it.
You don't see it.
You're
You
not in
don't
my
understand it the
shoes.
way I do.
That's
Right.
right. And I'll just sit and wait. And, and it's not ever said with judgment. It's always said with love. And then it's like, okay, well, what about this? And sometimes I'm guided to say, okay, let's walk through this.
Right.
Let's walk through this to see what it is that you might need to just stop off of autopilot and look at for 2 minutes.
And you say that, and I think of, because my favorite phrase has been, picking the knot apart.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think of like when I have necklaces that are all tangled up, pulling on them only makes it worse. So if you just ease that tension,
Yeah.
then you're able to pick it
Yes.
apart. And
Yeah.
and by you know not poking the bear sometimes, and just looking at it with a new perspective, it eases that tension. And I
Yes.
think that
Well,
that's
and
really
you
important.
and you be present with it instead of pushing through it, right? Going back to our
Oh,
topic from a couple of weeks ago, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And I know.
Absolutely.
I know. And you know what? It's funny because I used to, like, you want to talk about changing in patterns. Years ago, if I ever had that, I would just be like, Scott, I'd call my husband. Can you untangle this for me? Because I can't do it. Like I would get so impatient with it. I just be like, here, you do it. I don't want to take care of it. Right.
I see, and I used to say, "Oh, let me do it. Let me." I
Yeah.
love to untangle necklaces.
Oh, that's funny. And see, now I'm just like, okay. And I'll just be present with it. And then I'll be like, okay, so, and sometimes doing that is almost meditative because it
Right.
brings you so present. Oh, excuse me, into the moment, that it's like, well, yeah, it's almost like a cathartic kind
Right.
of thing to do.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
so that's a big change in the pattern because it's a change in my energy of that I'm willing to be present with something that might be little and annoyingly naughty for the
Right.
moment,
Exactly. Yeah.
and just sort of look at it and say, okay, so how do we untangle this? Because now that's where I am now, is like, oh, I'd rather figure out the puzzle than let the knots get
Yes.
worse. Yeah.
Right. Or bigger or more complicated,
Or
or
push it off to somebody else to take care of.
right. Well, or when it gets bigger, then you still have the same thing to figure out, just with more now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Until it becomes
absolutely.
overwhelming. Right.
Right. And then you have no choice but to just let go.
Yep. Yep. So that's, I think, the biggest message for this week has to do with being willing to, like, and it's funny because it is a challenge, and that's where you and I have a great, you know, um bouncing things back and forth, right?
Right.
Because like we take full responsibility for our own stuff. And then it's like,
Absolutely.
okay. And then there are times when
What am
both
I
of,
missing?
yes, what am I missing? And then when the other one says something and the response is, oh, I don't think it's that. That's when the other one just steps back and says, okay. You
Okay,
just let
I'll
that,
let you hold that for a while.
I'll let you play with that knot for a while. That's fine.
Right,
And
right.
that's good because then that usually means, ugh. And both of
Yep.
us are like, oh God. And then all of a sudden, there'll be the vomit emoji.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yep.
But that's where, and that's where it becomes more natural. Again, it goes back to, I know recently, or I don't know if I dreamt this or that we talked about this recently. I can't even tell anymore. But the self-responsibility, coming to a place of self-responsibility for
Right.
our whole creation makes it a very different place in how we interact with others, right? So then
It
this is
does.
like a little side note, but it helps because, to say it's great to have somebody who can hold that space with you of
Right.
self-responsibility and love and honesty without judgment, right?
Yep.
And then to be able to sort of bounce things, because honestly, these habits that are coming up, these patterns are some of the deepest things we have,
Right.
because we have fooled ourselves into, this is just who I am, this is just how I do
Right.
things for so long. And if you try to threaten it at all, the ego just shuts down and says, no, there's nothing to look at here, nothing to look at.
Or defends it as in, but no, this is what defines you.
Right, right,
This is what makes you
right,
that good person.
right.
Right. This is your purpose here. Yeah. So it's
Yeah. And so the message is, if you say that to yourself, or if you discount it and go, like, what do you
right.
know?
Right.
Look right inside of that little knot, because there it is.
There it
Right?
is.
And there it is. Oop, there it is. Yeah, this is very funny. I mean, and I find it funny because, yeah, that's what we do. It's the vomit emoji, or
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
there's 6 vomit emojis in a row.
Or a couple of rows.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, oh, there it is. But then I'm so thankful to have uncovered that when it comes up, right? Because then when you finally see it, you can change it. When you're blind to it, you're just going to continue,
And
and
you
then
and you're
bang,
just feeding it your energy.
and then you're going to bang your head against the wall and claim that you don't know what's the matter and that you don't know what to change because I'm doing everything right, right?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Hmm.
So that's a challenge. This is really an important, when we came to this discussion on Friday, I was like,
Right.
oh, this is really important because we don't really think about this because it's the stuff we don't think about, right?
Exactly. Right.
And sometimes, you could do things, just do something to change things up, because sometimes that in itself will help you get a different perspective. Like, just like commit yourself to maybe a day a week, getting up and doing things completely different than you usually do them.
Right. Right. And some people are so entrenched in their habits that if one little thing doesn't go right, it ruins their day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yep. And so just pick like one thing, or pick one thing a day to do differently.
Right.
I mean, really, sometimes it's as easy as taking a different route home from the store, or, just going to a different store at a different location than the one you usually go to. Like, things like
Right.
that sound so mundane, but doing that often changes enough perspective. And sometimes something will hit you on the way there, not hit you physically, hopefully not, but
Right. And you
but
start seeing things because otherwise you don't look at them. Just
yeah,
like, you have a mess on your counter and it gets to the point where you don't see it anymore unless you go somewhere else and then come back and then it's like, oh, now I
right.
see this.
Right. Or you
Right.
have something sitting there so much that you're just blind to it,
Right.
right? That you don't even, like, where is this? Where is this? I can't find it. And it's like right in front of you.
Or you're on the phone going, I can't find my
Oh
phone.
yeah, I know.
Where's my phone?
I've done that so many times.
I do that all the time. Panicked. I can't find my phone. I can't believe I can't find my phone.
While you're talking to somebody.
Right. Exactly.
I know, I know. So, I mean, even just to do something like pick one thing a day to do differently, it helps to change up the energy enough sometimes,
Right.
especially if you do it consistently, right?
Right.
Something every day.
Right. You start
Um,
seeing things in a whole new light.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, even, you know, how many times have you like say gone someplace with somebody, right? And you're always the driver or you're always the passenger, right? And you always see the same thing.
Right.
Well, then, I mean, for me, it's like when I go a certain place and I drive that way, and it's usually me that drives
Hmm.
this way, then like I'll be a passenger and I'll be like looking at the window like, oh, I've never seen that before, even though I've passed it 1,000 times,
Right.
which then sometimes prompts some kind of like thought or understanding or concept. I mean, it's funny, that's how like people ask, how do you get all this stuff? It's like, well, it's just being constantly aware
Right.
of what I'm being shown reflected back to me in my reality. That, and so when we pull ourselves off of autopilot, then we start seeing a whole lot more messages than
Yep.
we were seeing before.
Right. Which is the whole purpose of this.
Yeah. Yep. And it's like and now that I've come to look at it as a game, it's like the Where's Waldo game. Right? So
Right.
where is it?
Yep.
Then it's what is this about? But then it just becomes a natural thing. And so we then continue to look at what's my pattern. Like, okay, so now I've taken that off of autopilot.
Right.
Oh, look at that. Then it's funny how other things start to like stand out. Like, well, why do I do that all the time?
Yep. Yep. It's
Why?
like you can't once you break the pattern, you can't hide things as easily from yourself anymore.
Yeah. Right. Because even other patterns that are, because we don't just have one, we have many
Oh, yeah,
patterns
right.
and habits, right?
Exactly.
So once we break one, then we start looking at the other ones a little suspiciously, going, what if I change this? Like what would happen? You know?
Yep.
And then you start to play with it.
Yep.
So I think today what our session is to be about is about being able to take ourselves off of autopilot, right? I allow
Right.
myself, also like knowing that it's my creation. So I can take myself off of autopilot. I can do things differently. And
Right.
in that I allow myself to see the things that I'm making myself blind to, even if it's uncomfortable.
Right. And the things that you're not allowing for yourself because you're on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
there might be so many opportunities that you just don't even see. You just walk right past them without even realizing that you're walking past
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's so many things where I had been on autopilot for something for so long that when something finally changed, that I had to take it off autopilot. And then I was looking at it going, why was I doing it that way for so long? Like that
Right.
was just so inefficient, or I could have done it so much better. And of course there's the judgment, the
Oh no,
self-judgment.
yeah.
But then you get to the place of going, okay, well then see, what I find is I'm like, so I have gone through this period of reassessment of a lot of stuff. And when I find myself getting too like skating on things too much, I'll be like,
Mhm.
I need to look at, are there better ways to do things? Are there more efficient ways to do things? And that's like even just some very 3D things. But in doing that, sometimes it opens up my eyes to other things that are behind why I was doing stuff that just are unexpected,
Right.
which is what's good. Well, no, not to say good or bad, but what is to help us and expand our consciousness is that unexpected, because
Yep.
the expected we become blind to.
Yes. Yes.
We expect the sun, well, not here in North Carolina, we don't expect the sun to come out anymore.
Uh,
But
I'm happy to see it right now.
I
Not that it's going to warm us up any.
think we've seen the sun maybe about 20% of the time this entire winter, but it's sort of like, well, we expect it to be light in the morning when we wake
Right.
up, right? We
Right.
expect certain things. And when we take off that, like what happens if we woke up and the world was in darkness? What happens if we woke up and the sky was orange or purple or,
Right.
green? How would that throw everything else
Right.
off?
Where there were two moons or
Yeah,
two suns. Right.
right. Or, and like I think about going down, like going scuba diving, right? And how the colors
Right.
the light,
Filtered.
it
Right.
filters differently as you get deeper and stuff, right? So things look paler or they look different, different vibrancies because you have other colors being like eliminated and things like that.
Right.
And that just doing that helps to shift perspective sometimes. So, um, it's all that, it's all just what we can do to consider that. So to consider something different, because that's where we
Right.
are. We've come down to some deep crumbs, some really deep crevices, and the habits and patterns are where the message and remembrance lies.
Mm-hmm.
The taking everything off autopilot.
Right.
Because then it's not saying that we can't create any habits or patterns. It's a matter of reassessing constantly. Does this still serve me?
Mm-hmm.
Or does
Right.
this, what am I missing
Yep.
by putting it this way? So having that consciousness, being able to see that, committing to accepting the change of a pattern or a habit, and to recognize that one of the biggest messages is the ego going, yeah, I don't need to change that, or the triggered blowing off stuff or getting irritated about like questioning it or stuff like that is really the biggest message of all. And to be
Right.
able to, in love for yourself and gratitude for the ego and that protective thing, right? What it
Mm-hmm.
believes is protection is like, okay, you know what? But I'm limiting myself to be even better by not seeing beyond this.
Right. Right.
So putting ourselves in that place and that energy of being able to see things differently with clear eyes, with clear knowing, not just eyes, with clear knowing of
Right.
what to shift, what to let go of, what we can expand on, and to help that be the view of our blind spots that we've been asking for in easy and flowing ways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, you ready?
I am.
All right, let's go. Yeah, that was uncomfortable to many.
Yeah, I kind of got lost out there.
It's like all I kept seeing was this. It was like the bouncing ego ball. It was just like, nope, let's look over here and over here and over here and over here. And we're just like watching, and then everybody started laughing because it was like when you started seeing it that way, it sort of became a little ludicrous, right?
Right,
And it was like, and then we just watched, and then finally it settled, and everything just sort of melted together. And then it was like, oh well, look at how much clearer we can see now, right? And then that felt really nice, yeah.
yeah. I just kept seeing everything being really rigid and structured, and then by the end, it was just like kind of like blowing snow. It was just everywhere and swirling, and it was like it just felt so much better, so freer. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, there's a good yawn. Hmm. So stay present to all that this week. Stay present to take yourself off of autopilot. Look at the things you've done, always done a certain way, or
mm-hmm.
look at what's, you know, a pattern that's come up that you're banging your head against the wall at going, why does this come up for me every time I do this? Then it's like, well, then maybe I need to pull apart all the habits and patterns within it to
Right,
take it off of autopilot and see, you know, take that knot out of
right,
the knots out of the jewelry kind of thing. And be open and willing, you know, open your heart to allow those, to see those possibilities, you know, with love, right? No judgment.
right. Yep.
And so what I found has been helpful to me when I do that is, because I've hit some pretty deep ones, is okay, well, um, oh crap, what was I going to say? I just totally forgot. I'm like still out there. When I hit those deeper, like it's like, okay, well, I promise, like, what if I could see, like, if you're blind to yourself and the ego's still blinding you to it, you can say, what if I could see it? What would
Right,
it look like? What if I could see it differently? What would it look like? Um, what if I did know? What if I,
right,
you know, what if I did let it come to surface in a place of love? Like, how can I see that within myself? And then you can set that in meditation. If you do meditation, which, you know, we always are big advocates of, you can
right,
always set the intention to simply have clarity on those things you have on autopilot so that you can take them off of autopilot. Like you can start there.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff there. So everyone have a
Fun with
great
that.
week.
Yeah.
What was that?
Have fun with that this week.
Yeah, have fun with that this week. Play with it. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
signing out with this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.